All right. So welcome to the Federation X podcast, running on tangents, and happy new year to everybody. Welcome to 2021. Today is the first day of a new year. I am your host. I'm Grayson. I am a Federation X founder, Fedhead, new language that I've been learning recently from talking to my guests. And tonight I'm going to spend some time with Mikey Unlikely, the host of the Efed podcast. Mikey, thank you for joining me.
Hey man, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. It was cool meeting your little group of E-Fedders, and I'm excited to talk about the game and everything else we got to talk about.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited, and I love that we're going to get to live stream this. I'm looking forward to kind of keeping half my brain on what we're talking about and half on what's going on the live stream, so we can jump to questions as we see them that we like and get to. But I think the coolest thing about this is it came together really fast. I think we found your podcast and then contacted you and then connected with you on Discord less than a week ago. And here we are. We appreciate so much that you were willing to jump on and connect with us and do this so quickly. So thank you for that.
Well, that's not a problem. Clearly, I'm not that busy. No, I'm happy to do it. And actually, you caught me at a great time because we are on break for the EFED podcast. We did wrap up our 2020 year and we're taking 3 or 4 weeks off. Brian and I both need a rest from the weekly grind of a podcast.
Yeah, I'm way lazier than that. I do them when I feel like them. So I can only imagine the burden of doing a grind like that on such a consistent basis. That's wild. So today, with Mikey here with us, we're going to talk about kind of the state of the Efedding world. And for a lot of people, that might seem like, well, we kind of know it. You should know that if you're coming from outside our group, you don't really know us. We don't know it. We've been playing in this kind of encapsulated game that's kind of Efedding, but kind of not Efedding for over 20 years. And so there's so much about what's going on in your community in Efedding that is new to us. And as we started to kind of sink our teeth back in and started to really think about expanding our influence and our reach and connecting with new people, we met Mikey, and it really opened our eyes to how much this particular area of the game has grown and transformed, and we are oblivious to it. And so I think, one of the benefits of the last week is Mikey's been teaching us a lot about that, and using language, and actually on our Discord channel, which, hey, you're welcome to come see the chaos that it is. Be warned, we don't moderate. We've been playing together so long that nobody gets their feelings hurt, and it's a terrible, terrible place. But if you're looking for places that are lively with banter in the middle of the night, this is one of them. And so on that channel, we've had Mikey, he relabeled himself the EFED expert, because really that's not what we are. But for us, it's really what you are, which is part of the reason I'm so excited to dig into this. Just a little background.
Well, I'll say you guys dubbed me the EFED expert.
Yeah, it's true. That is exactly how it went down. A little background for people who are dropping in from outside. Our kind of microcosm of this Efedding landscape goes back into the 90s. In fact, Federation X itself today is its 18-year birthday. That's how long we've been playing together. And before Federation X, we played on, and intermittently, even while it was open, we played on a site called Rassle.net. We played on a site called Ring Wars before that. We played on a site called Cyberslam, many of us, which goes way back into the 90s and is a similar style of play to the game that we play now. And so in it, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about different styles of the Efedding game, we've really been lost in this little bubble that is kind of over here. And we're stunned to get out and find out about the podcast, about all the feds that are out there, the ones that we've started to poke our fingers into now, and some of our players have jumped in to do a little work. And so the whole plan is tonight to spend some time talking about just the state of the EFED world and getting to know a little bit more about Mikey and about his podcast, which is super cool. I had a chance to listen to some of them, really enjoyed them. Great production value, certainly surpasses what we're about to do. So that's awesome. Let's start, Mikey, and let's start with a conversation just a little bit about your background in Efedding. Like, how did you find it? How
Sure.
did you get started? What does the beginning look like for you?
I became a wrestling fan when I was 8 or 9 years old, and this is in the late 90s. And I mean, I say late 90s, like 96, 97. And by 99, we had a computer in our house, and it was just search wrestling all the time. I want to know everything there is to know. And first, you start finding about behind the scenes stuff, and you start learning a little bit more about the breaking kayfabe, so to speak.
Right.
And then you just search more and more, and then eventually I'm looking for wrestling games because I'm that age and I'm playing video games. I'm looking for something to do,
Yeah.
and I stumble upon e-wrestling just between searching and Yahoo groups and just hanging out in chat rooms, and people are like, "Come join my eFed." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what an eFed is, but I'll take a look."
Wow, that goes
So that's kind
back.
of how I found it. Yeah.
So, how many eFeds have you played in over the years?
I have no idea. It's when I was younger, it was just like every week I was in a new eFed, and it seemed like the reigns didn't last long. You would jump in, you'd have a couple feuds, you'd lose a match, and you'd be like, "Oh, screw this, I'm out, and I'm going to join somewhere else."
Yeah.
And back then, you're really bad. I mean, I was 10 years old or 11 years old, and I'm trying to talk trash, and I'll meet you behind the water cooler, and
So,
it's never exciting stuff when you're that young.
no, I will tell you that when my son, and I'm certainly older than you, when my son was on Xbox and really trash talking in his high school years, I think I was the most entertained listening to it because the trash talk was both really not good, but also kind of amazing. Like he would get guys and they would be arguing online, and then I would hear him say, "Want to be friends on Facebook?" And I knew it was an insult, but I was super entertained by it. Like, it's a different kind of trash
it's
talk.
funny how things change.
Yeah, totally agree.
It's really cool, but yeah, I had those terrible e-feds in the start, and I ran characters and stuff that and feds I don't even remember. So I would say from like 2099 to like 2007, I was just in 40 e-feds. I have no idea where I was. I can't remember most of that stuff. I took a long break after school and getting married and life and all of that stuff, and eventually came back to e-wrestling in I want to say 2014, and that's really when I just dove in full force. Dove in, tried to find everything I could about the hobby, and tried to get back into it, and I actually got decent at it. So turned out pretty well there.
Yeah, and I think your story's probably not different. We have players who have been with us on and off, and depending on the stage of life, the level of play fluctuates, right? And some of us get to a place where our kids move out and we've got nothing but free time and we play a lot more, and other of us get to a place where we've got 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and we're like, how do you expect me to find time to play? Right? It's
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Life comes at you quick, and they always say that life comes first. And so I think when I came back in, I was finally excited to dive into what e-wrestling was and get good and, write longer, better promos. And I was more into wrestling. I was more mature. I could write better, stuff like that. And then I would say it was crazy. That first stretch of e-fedding, I was in so many feds, and nothing was memorable. Whereas now, since 2014, I've been in maybe 5 or 6 e-feds, and for long stretches of time. And most recently, DefianceWrestling.com. I've been there for about 5 years now.
Wow.
So it's been long stretches where I've maintained the same character versus jumping around a lot.
That was my next question, because I think that's really relevant. We have some players who are playing the same character they were playing 20 plus years ago, and we have some characters who every now and then we'll put a main character on the shelf and bring in a new character just to do something fresh or try a different story. Or is that something you've done? Have you played different characters, or have you always tried to lock into the same main character?
So when I was young, I probably played 3 or 4 different characters that were probably actually the same character because I had no depth or perception of what a gimmick would be. So I don't count those, but really I try to stick to one character. I'm not a guy who can write 5 characters at a time. I'm not a guy who can try to separate my psyche into 2 or 3 different parts where I can write from 3 different perspectives. Like, it's not me.
Yep.
I want to put all my effort into one good character, and that's what I've done with Mikey Unlikely. Is the character I created in 14. I've run with him since. I've created a decent name for myself, especially in tag team ranks, and with my buddy Stevie, who runs Kendricks. And since then, I'd say we've had a blast just building the same characters up, the reputation, the gimmick.
Do you think that's normal, or when you look around Efedding, do you see a lot of fluctuation in character usage? That's, people who are just dropping guys after a run and trying someone new. What's more common?
It's probably it's a good mix. There's a lot of guys like me who can't do more than one character. Right? They just can't get their mind around it. But then in Defiance alone, we have Seth, who runs probably 5 characters simultaneous, and they're all very unique of one another. And it's unreal how some people do that. And maybe I know people, some of my best friends have run 1 or 2 characters that are very different, but they can't run them at the same time.
Gotcha.
So I think people, maybe you get bored with the character and you try something different, but it just depends on who you are and what you're into. A lot of people do a lot of different things.
I think that's right. And just a pause to acknowledge something on the live stream. I am too old to wear my hat backwards, Miller. You are 100% right. And yet the lack of a haircut since early February of last year, which I can now say, has necessitated it for this evening. So you're going to have to deal with that. All right. Fair call out. And this is what I'm telling you, people. There's no moderation on our Discord channel, and there's no shame in throwing heat at people. There's a lot of white heat on that Discord channel. So you get used to it, and you get used to it quickly.
I'm glad to see the activity. Thanks everybody for showing up.
Yeah, it's very cool to see that and to see it start to come through. I'll be really interested to see if we get some great questions that come as a result of what we're talking about, and I'll do my best to keep an eye out for it. Last question before I move kind of off your background in Efedding. Are there players you've played with, current or past, that you really shout out to, and why? What was it about that player or that character that really stands out for you?
There's always people who helped you along the way or who you've made great friends with. I've been fortunate enough in this hobby that I've gotten to meet so many people in real life through the game because of as like you had mentioned to me in private, you travel a lot for your work. Yep. I do the same. And it's just like you're always on the road. So I'm just like, hey, who's in town? Well, let's grab a beer. Let's grab a drink. So I think more so than writing with, most of my friends came from meeting up and just having conversations and becoming friends that way. Someone like Brian, my producer of the EFED podcast, even, we were in the same Fed. We didn't know each other. We didn't really talk to each other one-on-one. And then next thing you know, I'm in his hometown and I said, hey, let's grab a beer. 2 years later, I've got him running EFED podcast, EFED teas, the whole gambit. He's my guy. So shout out to Brian for sure. And it's cool that this game can just bring so many people with so many common interests together from all over the world. My tag team partner, my consistently tag team partner over the last 4 years, Stevie, he's from the United Kingdom and now lives in the Czech Republic. And we still operate as a tag team today, 7-hour time difference as the Hollywood Bros. Wow. It works out great.
Yeah. Well,
actually, go ahead.
I was just going to say that time zone difference means if you're writing and you're wrapped and you like got other stuff to go deal with, it's falling into the wheelhouse as that now he can be writing and then he'll wrap. Like it's
exactly
just 1-1 like that. And it certainly works out okay. We have some players that are in other countries. I'm pretty sure I saw Weedman was on. He's in Australia. I know that Tony Robes is in bed right now because he's a lightweight, and also maybe because he has a little kid and he has to be up early in the morning. But he's in the UK. So we've got some people like that, like your friend, who are all over the world. And it's interesting to see just the different time zones in which people get engaged in what's going on.
And somehow we've, managed to be successful despite the time difference. It's worked out well, and we've had a lot of fun together. And he's the one guy, whenever I get into a Google Doc with, whenever we write our stuff, I just cry tears of laughter. It's so much fun.
Yeah. So I have question from Brendan, who is actually one of our guys from outside of North America. And he's just curious, in your experience, are there many players outside of North America? Because he's only run into maybe 5 or 6 people in his time in the game outside of that North American base, which tends to be the bulk of who we run into.
I would say absolutely yes. There's an incredible amount of people outside of the United States, Canada. I've run into people even this year in South America.
Wow.
I've run into people in Australia. I have a friend in Australia. 2 of my best friends in the game are Andy Murray and Stevie, my tag team partner, and my other buddy. I flew to London to hang out with both of them because we spent a week together. It was crazy. I mean, there's so many guys. You want to get into Canadians? There's a ton of Canadians.
Oh yeah.
I'd say UK, Australia. Trying to think of some other hot spots. Obviously Canada, but yeah, I would say there's definitely a much bigger contingency now than there used to be, for sure.
I think that's really interesting. I also think it's interesting you flew over to the UK to hang out with them. We frequently take a vote after Chris goes to bed in the UK, and nobody is willing to fly to the UK to hang out with him. So, I mean, sucks for him, but you know.
Sorry, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't work out for you, pal. I don't know what to tell you. Let's talk a little bit about launching your own eFed, because that's something that I've seen on your Discord channel. You've got one that you're getting set to launch pretty soon. Tell us about it.
I'm very excited. I haven't been a true Fed head almost my entire career. I tried it once for about a year in an angle Fed, had a lot of fun, learned some things for sure. But now I'm kind of gearing towards the end of my handler run, or so I feel like, at least with Mikey Unlikely. And I think I want to try Fed heading before I get out of the game or before I take another break. I want to give it everything I got and try to open my own Fed. With that in mind, I hate wrestling on TV today. I can't stand it. It's not wrestling. It's not what I grew up on. It's not what I used to watch.
Right.
And I have a hard time even swallowing it. So what I do instead is I go back on the network or whatever and I watch old wrestling. So I decided to open my eFed in the same mind frame. It is known as Classic Wrestling. It will be at classic-wrestling.com. And we'll be opening up what will be the 80s vibe carried on to 2021. So the idea is that the 80s never died, kayfabe has never died, and wrestling is still what it was then. And we're going to try to mix match that with what has happened since then and see what we come up with. It's going to be really old school in the fact that there's going to be curtailed move sets, there's going to be curtailed theme music. You can't pick anything past a certain date, and everything's going to be geared towards old NWA and WWF over the top gimmicks. It's going to be wild.
So I was just going to ask about that because. Go ahead.
No, the only other thing I was going to say is what's going to set it apart otherwise is that it's a micro Fed. And what that means is that the role plays or your promos can be no longer than 750 words. So you really have to say more with less.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting piece. I was going to ask, because I'm obviously I'm old school. NWA, the old 80s NWA was fantastic. I think I liked it even more than I necessarily liked 80s WWE, like WWF times. And they had some really stringent things, like obviously you couldn't throw a guy over the top rope. There was a period in time you couldn't go to the top rope without getting disqualified. Like, are you going to play your people into that level?
That's a little stronger than I'm intending to go. I expect a splash off the top rope will be a finisher move. Let's put it that way. You can go to the top, you can use those moves, but there won't be any 450s or F5s or any move. What I hate about wrestling is how cooperative it is today. There won't be any gymnast move sets where guys are pushing each other around and then ending up in a spot.
Yeah,
everything's going to be contrived to old school wrestling.
Yeah, we have a couple of guys who I think have lined their characters up around that to address the fact that they're watching wrestling and they're like, hey, so they just hit 17 different moves that used to be finishers and nobody's been pinned yet.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck?
Yes. So I'm intending to bring back, finishing moves, actually finishing people off. I'm intending to bring back submissions, DQs. I don't care how strong your character is. He can submit every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I think it's going to be for a certain niche audience, but I think
Right.
that with the platform I have with the podcast, that I can definitely reach the niche audience.
Yeah, I think that makes a difference, right? A good podcast, a good audience, good exposure. You'll always be able to find people of interest to come and participate when you've got that type of outreach
Yep,
capability.
absolutely.
So I did see a question come through, and I thought it was super interesting. So I want to pause for a second and jump on that question. Our friend Colt out in Wisconsin asked the question. They distinctly remember as writers creating these really outlandish, creative stories, then blinking and 30 days later being like, what are the odds? Because I just saw that exact story play out on WWE or on. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, I think you guys might have taken my idea?
You know, this is one of my favorite e-wrestling tropes, and only because I think it's absolutely not true. And I think that everybody who gets caught up in it, it's to me, it's hilarious. Like it's a joke. I'm not saying that I don't take your claim seriously that you did something similar. I'm not
Oh no,
saying
you
that.
can trash talk Colt. He's accustomed to it.
No. Just this happens to everybody. I hear this shit all the time. No offense to anybody out there who says this, but I think it's the biggest crock of shit of all. And it's hilarious to me when people say that because similar things happen in wrestling since the dawn of time. They're recycling angles that happened in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the thousands. So everything is a copy of something.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think there's some interest, and I think there's a reason. So in classic Colt fashion, he has fired back wildly inappropriately on the live stream. Um, so uh, I think there are some times where you look at the timing of certain things, though, and you do say to yourself, hey, that's a little unusual. And one of the ones that I see Jay Sanders, who played Philly Fats, calling out is there was a guy running around in C-Slam and in Wrestle who had a character called Naked Man, who was basically just a naked dude. And when that showed up with Naked Gideon, there was a big outcry, like, and so I think you make a valid point. I think there's a lot of recycling of ideas and a lot of recycling of gimmicks. I'm not familiar now. I don't do a deep dive on how often dudes get naked in a wrestling ring. That's not a thing I search the internet for. I tap Johnny XS to do those searches for me. Do you think that timing of the way things come up ever just creates that? Like clearly you don't think it happens.
Sure.
Do you think though that maybe people have some legitimate like questions at least when it comes to, hey, for 6 years I've been doing this, and
yeah, I've seen some things that seem eerily similar. I will give them that, and I will say that maybe. Well, I can't even say maybe. I don't believe it, but
right.
you know, it is what it is. I would think that Naked Midian would be closer to what happened in like the World Cup, where streaking was a big thing in the late '90s.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Although I do think, listen, let me play the devil's advocate. If it was true, and while
Okay.
Wrestle and C-Slam were open, they were stealing ideas from a whole bunch of guys living in their mother's basement with nothing else to do but pretend fake internet wrestle online.
Yep.
It would explain that when all those sites closed, WWE went to shit. It would explain that.
It would.
So I just want to throw that out there as a possibility, people.
It would also explain the WCW closed.
It's true. That's right.
These weird coincidences all seem to align. It's like
there's a timeline involved. That's all I'm pointing to.
I like
all
it.
Right. Colt would like to know why you hate him. I think that we'll come back to that one, Colt, because we're going to take a poll.
Colt. I do. I love him because I looked at the chat and it's so small on my screen that I thought it said Colt Cabana at first, and I'm like, holy shit, we've attracted the top of the game, but yeah, no dice. So Colt, I love you anyway.
There you go. I appreciate Philly calling me out and telling me he was living in his own damn basement at the time. That seems perfectly fair, Philly. No judgment. All right, let's talk a little bit more before we jump off this. So part of the uniqueness of what you want to do as a Fed head is about setting the game back in a time that was a little bit different. And you're going to have them do posts that are capped at 750 words. Now, we got a lot of people on here for whom, and I think we've talked to you a little bit about our Fed, so you're starting to get an idea of how differently we play.
Yep.
When we say, hey, you're capped on a particular post, which we generally don't do, but we do have to do on occasion with Benny, who is known to write 10,000 words in a post. 8,000 of them not at all related to what's going on, by the way. But when we do that,
sure, that's why I'm doing this.
Right. So generally we cap if we're judging it, which I think is what you guys are doing. But can you tell me what a card is going to look like, maybe for the people who don't EFED, but actually play our game, which is kind of a variation or a different type of EFED. If they're looking at your game, there's a card coming up. What does that look like for them?
Sure. And I think this is where we're going to dip into the different types of EFED conversation.
Exactly right.
Between the way you guys play, the normal ways that, well, I don't want to say normal, but you guys typically are the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
So my Fed will be what they call a role play Fed, where you have the opportunity to write one promo, 750 words. That's it. And then I'm going to base my judgment on those two promos of those two competitors against each other. Better one wins. There is no angling, there is no simming, there is only a judging winner.
Right.
I will have two other people on my staff who will also be judges, and then if there's anything that comes up in controversial style, then it'll be a three-person judge. If I say, hey, this is too close to call, you guys both give me an opinion too.
Right. I think we've done something similar when historically the way that we've played has been different from that in a number of ways. You talk about simming. We came from a game where like getting to the top of the ladder and actually fighting your own matches each day on a simulator so that you could initiate them and see there was always part of the game. So there was that clickability part of the game, but also the role play was like it was on us to tell the story in the match. Not the judge's only job was if we put a role play points or towards the winner, Sim would get some points, role play maybe got some points. Then the judge would sit down and read the role play and say, hey, this was better. I gave it this many points. Or versus in your case where you're saying to them, here's the card, one post, 750 words, convince me in those 750 words, you should win. Now, if they win, who tells the match story? Is that you?
That's me. So me and my two other judges will also be match writers. And our job is to, on the television shows, to tell the story of the match between the two guys. And even though it's 80s, I'm not going to have jobber matches and guys getting totally stomped. Like
crush matches,
yeah. I'm not going to be doing any of that. So everybody's going to be competitive. As long as you show up and role play, your match will be competitive. If you don't show up, then, that's going to be otherwise. Then squash matches come up. But yeah, 750 words, one-on-one, give me your best shot. And then otherwise, you can submit segments to the show. If you want to tell a story overarching about your character or build character development, then that can happen on the show in the form of segments or interviews or so on and so forth.
Now, do they come to you and ask for segments, or do they have the ability to just go post segments whenever they want?
They're going to have the ability. So the way my website's going to work once it's finished, and it is in development now, we're going to have an app that is a backstage app, they call it. And so they're going to have the option of logging into the website. They can submit segments for the card, and then obviously I'll have final say when I'm looking through everything, lining it up as to what's going to make the show and what's not.
Got it. It's interesting. And I think as we get deeper into some of this, I'll contrast it to what we do for some of the people out there who are like, what do you mean you guys don't do this? Like, I don't understand the world that you're coming from. I'll give them some perspective. But before we get fully into that, let's turn a little bit to how we found you. Let's talk a little bit about the podcast and how you ended up creating the podcast, because first of all, we love that we found it. We love that you do it. We obviously podcast. It's not nearly as professional or serious. If you listen to them, there's a lot of trash talk involved in them. It's really a little bit of self-serving. Let's get together. There are other people who aren't on this one that will like to laugh at us making fun of each other. There's a lot of that. Whereas yours, there's none of that. I'm sure there's some in some of the ones I listen to, but there's a production value and a focus on the wider community of Efedding. And I'm really interested in what led you to do it into its creation and got you there.
Sure. And just like I said earlier, everything's a copy of something, right? And I'm not the first EFED podcast to happen. Actually, when I got back into e-wrestling in 2013, 2014, there were a handful. There was EFED Journal was going on. which I was not aware of at the time. Efed Gorillas, which I was aware of, was like a group of 4 Fed heads or something that would get together and they discuss different stuff. And it was almost like that's the community show. And then you had, EW After Party, and they just kind of hung out and had drinks and laughed. And these are the things that, I would every once in a while jump on and be a guest on. And I thought, this is so cool. It's so much fun to talk to these people in real life. And then I decided, in 2020, Brian and I had met in the past and we'd done another podcast and it was called the Atomic Dropcast. And the idea behind the Atomic Dropcast was we would get drunk, we'd watch wrestling from our childhood, and we would laugh and make fun of it and just bullshit. And
Okay, so first of all, where do I find those videos? Because that is right up my alley.
It's all audio, unfortunately, but yeah, you can follow along with us because what we did was we started at the Royal Rumble '97, and we just watched every episode of Raw and every pay-per-view fall in chronological order through '97. I think we got up to Survivor Series, and it was something like 55 episodes. And you can find it at atomicdropcast.com if you guys want to find that. It's all archived. We haven't done an episode in over a year, but it was our baby. It was our introduction to to podcasting, and it's what we got into. And then when we kind of stopped doing that, I got bored, and I just said, I want to keep recording. I want to keep producing and doing something. And so I said, I'm going to do the Efed podcast. And Brian said, okay, well, let me help you. Let me see what I can do. And he built me a website and he did all kinds of things to get me set up. And I said, okay, but I'm going to try it myself. And my production was terrible. So episodes 1 through like 20 was all me, and they're hot garbage. But other than the guests were great, but my production quality was not. But once Brian jumped on board about episode 25, he's been riding with me now for 33 episodes or something.
Wow.
It's been fantastic, and we've grown greatly, and the production quality is great. And Brian produces music in real life, so he's very, very good at it.
That would explain the quality of the production I was listening to, because it's
a little bit of luck.
Yeah, it's solid. Also, I think we can't move past it too quickly and ignore this. The Atomic Dropcast is a fantastic name for a podcast.
Thank you.
Really landed on a sharp one there. That's great.
Yeah, Atomic Dropcast was great.
Yeah. So you launched the Efed podcast. Mm-hmm. How do you start building it? How do you start, do you just start going to people you already knew in the game? How does building this take place?
Yeah. So an idea is born, and I said, okay, guys, in 2 months from now, I'm going to start this podcast. And I started planning with an idea, and I said, all right, let's get organized. Let's do this the right way. I said, okay, I'm going to need guests. And first of all, I went to Defiance, where I was already handling. I said, okay, who wants to be a guest? And I had a couple people volunteer right away. Of course, I want to be talking about myself. Everybody loves to talk about themselves. That's why I'm here today. So, so first I had to get some guests, and the first couple episodes, there was no rhyme or reason. It was just, hey, how are you? How did you get into Efedding? Let's talk about your life. And I obviously, as I got more experienced, I learned about formatting and getting the questions right to go along with the story and everything else. But it was a lot of work. It started in November of 19, and then really it took, I want to say, 20 episodes to really catch on. I mean, at first we got a bunch of views because people were curious, but we really built up our audience on Twitter. So I can't stress how important Twitter was in the early part of advertising for us. It was huge. We're up to 1,300 followers now on Twitter almost.
Wow.
We've got 110 YouTube subscribers. It's gone great, and each week we seem to be growing and growing. And obviously, it depends on the guest. If someone's more popular, they obviously get a lot more listens than someone who's not. But typically, we tried to expand it, and we made it open to everybody. I said, if I'm going to cover Efedding, I want to cover everything. Whether you're an angle fed, role play fed, you're in the 2K feds, the CAW feds, whatever, sim feds. And I said, I want to learn about it. So what I did was I just started grabbing people from Twitter. I just put up on a post and said, hey, who wants to be interviewed for the Efed podcast? People saw the graphics, they saw the things that we were taking seriously. And before I knew it, my wait list was 50 names long. And then once we got going, the wait list got to 100 names within the first year. And I just said, okay, I'm cutting it off, because I can't plan 2 years in advance.
Right.
So at this point, we've gotten through the first year of interviews, and we've got a whole nother year already scheduled.
So that's really interesting that you can see a list grow like that. Let me let me ask this question. You mentioned you've got a pretty big subscription list from where you started on YouTube. One of the things that I looked at while we were starting to put stuff onto YouTube and start hosting on YouTube was you have to have a certain number of subscribed followers before you can have a dedicated name on YouTube. I thought that number was 100. You're above it, but you don't have that. Did I misunderstand, or is that just not? Is there something I don't know yet? Is there a reason that we don't just search YouTube / the EFED podcast?
Because I'm not smart enough to figure that out. That would be the reason.
Well, see, that's your payback for coming on. I've given you a piece that you could run away and use.
I didn't know that was a thing. So as of tomorrow, you will find us at /EFED pod. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to do my research and we will see. But that's good to know. I would say Twitter has been the focus, because Twitter has grown us night and day. And then obviously I built the Discord up and built a community out of it. And it turned into a thing now where it's the place to go, where people come to advertise their feds. They come to mingle with other people who aren't into the same kind of things they are, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. One of the things that we started doing around the time that we connected with you was starting to talk about, let's look outside of this small, a couple of people on Facebook or a couple of people on trading emails. Like, how do we get out into that social media world that is filled with people? And then you dropped me a line and said, like, hey, there's a lot of people out there who EFED that they don't even know you exist.
Yeah.
And so we started encouraging our players to get on Twitter and to start figuring out how to connect and network. And we're already starting to see some interesting byproducts that I would never have guessed in a week we'd have seen results start to show up. It's amazing. And only leads me to think, if we can get better and more polished at our approach to it, that it can only become a better tool for us.
You're absolutely right. It was incredible. I wasn't a regular Twitter user prior to the podcast, and now it's as far as advertising goes, it's my go-to. And
so, I mean, you have so many people connected to your feed now that you're putting it out and people are retweeting it and sharing it. Is that how it's spreading for you?
That's the big part of it. A lot of people in my community are very supportive of us. We're very in our community, and I had to maybe tell your guys this too. We are a safe space for EFEDing. So I do encourage everyone of all shapes and sizes to come in and talk. I don't encourage bullying or trolling. So all of that stuff will be kicked out, but it is a good community space, and it's one of the few community spaces left. I look at places like EFED Central here on Facebook, and it's kind of toxic. And I look at places like some of the or some of the websites that I used to follow as a kid or growing up, and they just don't exist anymore.
Right.
And forums are kind of the dying thing of EFEDing, and people are turning to Discord, they're turning to chat rooms, they're turning to Skype chats, and that's how they're forming their communities now. Their OOC is all happening off the website. And I think that the Discord, jumping on that and creating that community, was instrumental in the size we are now, because people just kept on believing in us and retweeting us and advertising us, and they got to know other people in the community, and they realized that, yes, this is a great place to hang out.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point, and I won't gloss over it, because I think it's it is an important thing, like, for us to recognize. Like, if you showed up and looked at our Discord, you might immediately be like, ooh, this could be a toxic place, because a lot of the guys are a little older. They kind of grew up playing a game in the 90s where guys were hard on each other. And so the ones that are still around, like, they know each other really well. When I say there's a lot of shit talk, sometimes I have to stop and go, hey guys, if we're going to encourage people to come land on this, maybe you should shit talk in a private channel. And there's no way I'll ever be able to rein it in. But here's what I think is really important. If you show up and you see that, I just want to encourage you to assume they're completely full of crap, and that's not actually who they are. I've met lots of them, most of them, many of them in person. They're somebody's mom, they're somebody's dad, they're somebody's brother. They're good dudes. They're not actually, one of our friends who's on the live stream right now, who I know won't mind me sharing this story, named Eric, is not in a wheelchair. Somebody made him a song and played it to him on a podcast called Wheelchair Eric, and sang it to him about him being handicapped. And Eric has been the world's greatest sport about it, but the joke has never gone away. So if you
Sure.
show up and see somebody teasing him about like, how do you get down the stairs, Eric? What are you doing? Like, they're actually old friends. And so please don't mistake that for it being guys being
It's
toxic.
it,
They're
it's
actually
so it's social awareness, right? It is
right.
what it is. Is it's when the new guy comes, you don't immediately say fresh fish. You don't
Right.
immediately
And in
jump on
fact,
that.
we had a person off of Twitter kind of make a profile and poke their nose in. And what I saw, that person didn't choose to engage, or certainly hasn't chosen to engage yet. But what I saw was 9 different people line up and go, "Hey, welcome to the boards." Like immediately,
Yeah.
like, "Hey, welcome here." Like ignore all the stupid stuff. "Hey, we're glad you showed up," which
Yeah.
is, I think, the genuineness of
There's nothing wrong with picking on your friends. There's nothing wrong with banter. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you take it somewhere that it's not known, then you might have the problem. As long as you
yeah,
keep it in house and introduce people to it the right way, there's no problem with that.
yeah. And I think that's an important distinction because, like I said, we don't moderate a whole lot generally because at this point we have a smaller community that doesn't need to, that has known each other for decades, plural. But I think it was a good distinction because you point out you create a very safe environment, and I think individually it is intended to be that way. I think in the characters that some people choose to play, maybe not quite to that level. So let's talk a little bit more. You launch the podcast, you
Yep.
connect with people on Twitter, you see this community start to grow.
I'll show real quick, efedpodcast.com. You can find us there. You can find us on Twitter at the Efed Podcast. You
Yeah.
can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, all of your major platforms, and more on YouTube. Obviously, the YouTube channel. If you just search Efed Podcast, we should be the first thing that pops up. And please give us a follow on YouTube. That would help us immensely. And on the Twitter machine at the Efed Podcast.
Yeah, and I'll say to our guys, if you haven't already done that, like get on. First of all, we have new pages. Make sure you get your ass on those and like those and share those. But also, for sure, the EFED podcast, get on there. Make sure you like it. Make sure you follow it. Make sure you share that news to your other friends as well. It's a great podcast. You really do need to listen to it. It's a good time. I see Tim's throwing it up in the live stream. Appreciate that, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how often do you get requests like this one from other people saying, "Hey, why don't you come on our podcast because we want to talk to you"?
I've done 56 of my own episodes, and this is episode 3 of the offshoot. So,
Oh wow,
it's maybe every 6 months, so that's nice.
yeah, that's. Hey, listen, there's some level, and I maybe even people who are seeing the other podcasts and going, oh well, now that you're doing it and I'm listening to it and I'm kind of into it, or especially if they've seen that recent one where you're starting to do your countdown of the top 100, which I think is fantastic. Like video
And
production,
that brought the heat, let me tell you.
I have no. So first of all, kudos to you for doing a top 100, doing it in video, not just printing it up and putting it up on a website, but actually standing up there. Like heat,
I got to do more. I haven't recorded it all, but I'm working on it.
Heat is good, right? We even white heat.
Controversy creates cash. That is no lie.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And so it's great that you're doing that. I think if people aren't watching it, they should be paying attention to that, especially if they're from the community that you've been connected into. I don't know about everybody else, but I would be just waiting. And if I didn't land at number 1, I would be screaming about it all year until you did it again. You'd have heat all year.
And I will be doing it again.
Yeah,
and I will be doing it again in 2021. So be ready, guys. If you want to get your name on the list, have your friends vote for you, because that's what it was. It was just voting.
Is that how you guys did it?
Yeah, I counted 1,900 votes by myself and tallied them all. And top 100, there you have it.
Wow,
I got 750 names nominated.
Wow, that's really a cool.
That's how big e-wrestling is.
So I see. I think it's Megan, and I hope Megan, I'm pronouncing that right. I'm just pronouncing it the way I would expect.
Yes, Megan. Megan is of our. She's from my community, so shout out to Megan. Thanks for showing up tonight, Meg. She's also episode. Hold on with me. Damn, I'm supposed to be faster than this.
So while you're checking, Got it?
Go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
Okay, so while you're checking, let me ask this question. Megan posted and said, hey, I didn't make the top 100, but I'm still super excited. Is the list already out somewhere that Megan would know that, or have you given her some inside information?
No. The list is out. I did review all 100 on Twitter because the videos fell behind because I, full disclosure, got Lyme disease and was down and out for like a week and a half.
Oh, crap.
And bounced back. So I'm in good shape and bounced back. But yeah, watch out for those ticks, guys.
Well, 2020 was not the year to get anything at all.
Hey, a little Lyme with the corona. There's nothing wrong with that.
How many times have you said that?
So many. That's the dad joke of the year. Are you kidding me?
Kidding. So
Megan was episode 29.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Thanks for sharing that, Megan. Here's one of my questions about, you do podcasts. Sometimes the conversations just flow and they go normally. Sometimes you do podcasts and it turns into a train wreck and people are still watching.
Yes.
We did a podcast that very clearly turned into a train wreck, and yet the live stream was alive because they were so entertained by watching the train wreck happen. What's the most unexpected or surreal or strange conversation you've had as a result of doing the podcast?
So many. I would say there's some weird ones where people went way too far with I don't know if it's bullying or someone was getting at them, so they went too far back at the other person with like doxing and real life stuff. And I've seen one where someone's wife was sharing pictures that they shouldn't have been sharing, and man, there are some crazy stories on the EFED podcast.
Oh my gosh. So we've had one or two wives while we were podcasting think it would be cute to show up in the back, and we've said to everybody, don't ever let your wife near the mic while we're on a podcast.
No, never.
Nothing good will come of this. And
my wife knows, don't ever come near my computer.
Yeah. So more than one of our players have had a wife, and at some point I'll tell you these stories because they're a good laugh, but the people involved do not find them half as funny as everybody who got to hear them.
Oh, no, they wouldn't. But those stories happen more than you'd think.
So if you had to drop a podcast number, is there one we should go listen to?
For a very specific story, there is, and it would be on number. Oh, it's going to be a good one. 39. Number
39. So if you're looking for one with some of that line cry, I know Price has already got number 39 up and he's listening to it because this is right in his wheelhouse. Hey, one of the things, Tim, who is Lars, he's one of the other founders at Federation X. There were three of us that founded it.
Yes, he's the guy who reached out to me.
That's right. He made first contact. That's, he raised the question, have you ever had somebody maybe get a little too in character rantish on a podcast?
So on the first 2 or 3 episodes, and I really wanted this to be a thing, I asked people to do in-character promos and record them for me and send them in. And for, I want to say 2, 3, 4 episodes, people did. And then everybody on the internet shit on them and everyone stopped submitting them.
Oh,
and
really?
I absolutely loved them. I thought it was fun. I thought it was, hey, get in character, cut a promo, wear a lucha mask. Yeah. It's not video. No one can see it. So just have fun. And people got real shitty with them and trashed them. So it was quickly dropped, but we did do in character stuff.
That's good.
I think it should be brought back. I still think it should be brought back.
Listen, I just today was having a conversation with some of our guys and said, hey, it's just audio. Cut some white heat on audio and send it to me and I'll patch it up and put it together pretty. And we'll use that as part of what we put out there in marketing. Cause I think that sounds like fun.
I agree.
Now they're all going to go,
agree,
I'm not doing this to get crapped on by the internet. You just killed my plan, Mikey.
Just don't put it on Twitter, man. That's all.
Is that where it really went sideways?
Yeah, it went sideways. But hey, if anybody's still interested, I'm willing to air it any week. You let me know. I'll put it on the show.
Oh, see, I don't know how so we got some pushback. We had some people like, I don't know. Like, one, no one sees your face. They don't know who you are. Number two, you can re-record it till you get it right. And now
Exactly.
you can not only send it to me and I'll put it out, you could send it to Mikey and he'll put it on the show. Like you can throw white heat shade from multiple sources
Well,
at whoever you're in a feud with.
and here's the thing, on Facebook, there's entire feds dedicated to video and audio promos. So those guys are my target audience for this.
And so I haven't seen those yet. I know Tim has been looking around to try and see different things, and that's one of the things he went to look for. And he's waiting on a list to be let in so he can check it out. Have you seen them, and are they as great as they sound?
So there are the best. Some of these guys are, you wouldn't believe how good they are. Like you can tell that they've done it over and over. They practice. They're good. They can cut promos. Some of these guys I wouldn't want to meet. You know, in a bar, he'd embarrass me in front of my wife. Uh, other guys, they're the exact opposite. They want to be a big bad wrestler, but their body and their voice just don't match it, and it's hard to watch.
Hey, Philly,
it's the best of times and the worst of times.
It's long hair all the way.
Oh, there he is.
It's not a mullet. I just can't be bothered to worry about haircuts right now. So stop talking about my hair and start talking about what we're talking about, because it's much more interesting. So you've answered one of my questions about this already, which is that Brian does some really solid production work for you. And that plays a long way into the quality of what you put out.
Yeah.
How long does it take from recording to release? Like, is he doing next week's this week? Is it like, is there a specific period of time delay, or is he popping them out like 48 hours later?
Well, there used to be quite the delay, whereas when I do my interviews, I do my interviews 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Okay. So my interviews they're done, they're wrapped, they're in the Dropbox ready for them.
Got it.
When it comes to the other aspects, I try to be up on what's happening right now, the intros, your outros, your questions of the week, when I'm highlighting a Fed, I try to be as up on with their current events as possible. So I do it the week of. With those, I'm typically recording by Friday, and Brian has it up on our Patreon for our early listeners on Sunday. So He's turning around in 48 hours easy, if not 24 hours.
Wow.
So he's got it up there, and typically the way we do it, he's taught me enough production that I can do the bits that I'm recording on my own to where they're just plug and play, and he can just put them into the episode, and then he only has to edit the interview or 1 or 2 things. So we've got it down to a science at this point between the two of us, but Brian is the backbone of the EFED podcast. He's the reason we have the high production values. He's the reason that people put us above the other EFED podcasts that came before us. It's because our quality is pretty good.
Man, it makes such a difference to have somebody like him. So good work, Brian, because I listened and they're great. I was going to ask one more question, but you really have given us some pointers to some specific podcasts with some of your answers that we can go to get started. So I'm going to skip that question because there's one last thing I want to get to before we dive into our bigger topic for today.
Sure.
You also run a merch site related to EFEDs. And I think I would be remiss if I skipped it, because I think it's a cool little piece of kind of what you're doing. Tell me a little bit about efedtees.com.
So the one thing that Brian hates to hear me say is I have an idea, because every time I have an idea, it includes a lot of work for Brian. So Brian builds our websites. He does our production. He does everything except he calls me the talent, and he's everything else. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So basically I just promote and do the social media stuff. But Brian's awesome in that regard. And when I said I have an idea for the EFED podcast, he was very supportive. He said, there is no other podcast right now. It's very niche. There is a hole. Let's fill it.
Right.
And then it became, I said, how cool would it be if I could wear my character shirts? How cool would it be if I could wear a Defiance shirt where I'm wrestling? And I said, I got an idea. And before you knew it, EFED Tees was born as an idea. We were already selling merch for Atomic Dropcast. And we decided to take a step further and design a whole website around it and pick a new vendor who was very reliable. We can ship worldwide. There's only 5 countries in the entire world we can't do for a reasonable rate under $10 American.
Awesome.
So Efed Tees is a great store where you can get a t-shirt for your character, your stable, your tag team, whatever. If you have graphics, if you need custom graphics, we can do both. It does cost money to get it, obviously, to get
Sure.
a shirt made up. But once you give us the design, we put it up for the website, and you can either, you can use it for canon in character. There's your shirt up live online. You can buy it, obviously, wear it. I am actually wearing an Efed t-shirt because I'm a smart marketer. I've got a Mikey Money accepted almost nowhere t-shirt right now. So that's based on my character Mikey Unlikely. So it's a fun deal. I can tell you based on experience, we have higher quality than PWTs, and we're typically about the same price. And we've got a much higher quality t-shirt, much higher quality printing that won't tear off in a wash or two. And yeah, it's good stuff.
So tell us a little bit. For sure, there are going to be some people who go, "Hey, we should do that. We should get some FedEx tees, or we run a stable. We should get a stable tee." So, what's the process look like? You say, there's clearly a setup cost. You've got to get the artwork and everything set up. So, what's that look like?
So if you have your own artwork and all we have to do is slap it on a shirt, it's $5 and we'll put it up on our site. That way, that just covers us making any money whatsoever. If no one ever buys that shirt, we made $5.
Right.
That's the deal. And then basically when they sell the shirt, we do make the money. And I can tell you, Brian and I are making a total of $2 each on a shirt. Right. So we are breaking the bank each and every day. Yep. I think we made $20 last month.
Nice.
So no, it's not meant to. Everyone got mad when we unrolled that because everybody gets mad at everything. And they said, "Oh, you're trying to monetize the game. You're trying to make money." And we're really not. We're just trying to cover, we bought EWTees.com. We bought EFedTees.com. We bought EWmerch.com. We're just trying to cover our costs. We're trying to have fun and trying to create an opportunity for people to experience the game on the next level. Between the podcast, the t-shirts, I'm Mikey McMahon over here.
Right. I get it. And so so I already know, right? I was having a conversation before this podcast with my longtime tag team partner, and he said, our stable definitely, we need good guys t-shirts.
I'm sorry, I forgot to cover this. If you do not have your own graphics, we do charge a graphic design fee, and obviously it is more than $5. Brian, once again, does all the work. He does take the time. He does design custom graphics. He does make logos, sends them to you, make sure you're good with them, changes whatever you want. You can check out all of the Ring the Bell shirts on our website, all of the Danny Six, the Wolf logos. We created all of those original. Probably about 75% of what you see on the website is original, and the other 25% is submitted by people who wanted the shirt.
Gotcha. What formats do you need it submitted in?
That's a great question to ask Brian.
Okay. So I'll circle back to you offline and find the answer.
It's on the website. It's on efedtees.com. Okay. Go to efedtees.com, click on the one that says "Want a shirt."
Got it. All right. See, I like that. I'd buy a good guy shirt. Of course you would. They're the good guys.
And shout out to Meg. Meg's one of our top customers at Efed Tees. She's got hoodies. She's got masks for her Fed. She's got all kinds of stuff. Great customer.
That's fantastic, Meg. That's amazing. So, and Weedy says, "I'd buy a good guy shirt just to burn it on camera."
I'll take it. That's business for me, buddy.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, they're already jumping up, seeing lists of things go by, that the shirts and things they should do. So that's fantastic.
Bring the business, guys.
Do you have a favorite of the shirts you guys have put out so far?
So I've got a couple. Obviously, I love the ones that are geared towards me. Mikey Money, accepted nearly nowhere, is mine. So is Hollywood Bruvs, or it's Frap Life instead of Trap Life. Because Hollywood Bruvs, they're white guys, they're basic bitches, but they're men. So they're
we know lots of those. Yeah.
Yes. So that's our gimmick in real life. So that's my wife wears that one quite a bit, the Frap Life. There's also No Place in This Hobby. It's a great one because we had one of my best friends was once told by another Efedder he had no place in this hobby, and we made it a shirt, and it's done very well.
That's hilarious. I love that. I love that that's an option out there. I know we have players who are like, if I can get the artwork, this thing that happened last week will be a t-shirt by next week.
Not
Like,
only
we have players that will do that.
Not only can we get the artwork, but we prefer funny t-shirts to serious ones. So
Oh,
we're
that's
happy all day to do that stuff.
Yeah, love that. Let's take a turn. So first of all, we've spent, you know, the better part of an hour getting to know you, your background, the empire that you're building to rival Mr. McMahon, which I think is great. But a lot of people are here to hear the conversation about the state of Efedding as a game.
Yes.
And I'm really interested. So before we dive into my questions around that, I want to give some context. We play differently, I think, than what everybody is familiar with. And I think that's an important backdrop before we start asking these questions. We're going to ask lots of questions that some of the people listening are going to go, well, how do you not know that? And the answer is, as I said in the beginning, we really have been in a bubble for 20 plus years. And so the result of that is we play a game which is a blend. When you create a wrestler in our game, you're really given, first of all, largely, we don't break kayfabe, which means largely your character is your character and it's real life for them. There's very little. Every now and then you get a character who really well writes the story of like, no, that's my job, and then I go home and I'm Frank at home. But you don't get a lot of that, and it's written in a style that is rolling role play. So it's largely a community of guys who really, I think we've had the odd girl. We don't have a lot of them. They're certainly welcome. That they like to write, they like to tell the story, but they don't want to tell it on their own. They don't want to just go away and write a book. And so there's a tendency to write a post and then wait and come back a day or 2 days later, and somebody else will have carried the story on, maybe somebody after that, and then to step back in and pick it up. So generally people are respectful of your character. They are really driving the story. But that carries right through into when we do cards. When you do a match and you guys want to tell the story of your match, whereas you write the match after you read their promos and decide who's going to win, they might write a promo going into the match and then write 2 posts in the match that are actually about the match flow or action or the behavior of their character or their manager, or all those things during the match. The only thing that the Fed heads are really responsible for is 1, to make the cards, 2, to maintain the order, and when we score role playing, to do some judging. But even more recently, we've started to realize we have a simulator, so you can go to it and say, this is my character. I'm going to sim Mikey Unlikely. I'm allowed to fight him this many times. And it's, 3 versus 3. So he's going to fight me 3 times. I'm going to fight him 3 times. The simulator will say, here are standard matches, or maybe we're in a cage match. It'll have a cage match option. Like, I can go through and pick what I want. And it's really kind of a coin flip. And the idea behind that, we used to give out heat point. The more active you were, the stronger you were on the sim. We took away that, and we went to a place where it's really a coin flip. The idea is to give you closure so you can figure out how your story moves forward, not necessarily to penalize you for maybe not being the person who writes 6 times a week. And so we moved away from that. And so it's really daily life. It's story arc to story arc, lots of angles, right? I hear you guys talking about angled feds, and I'm going to ask more questions about that. But we have a sim that I control for my characters. We have a story that I control for my characters. I interact with other people. I roll with what they do to my characters. They roll with what I do. And we have Fed heads who basically oversee it and just keep it from becoming chaotic in a Shark Tank filled with things getting eaten. Like, really, that's the sole purpose of them. So it's really, for me, sorry, I just see something going by, and I want to stop right in mid-thought and call it out. So Lars says, the God of How wants you to be reminded that you own a fucking Century Club.
I do, yeah. 100 drinks in like an hour or 2 or something.
That
madness. He wants to do radio. Yeah, he wants to do radio where I interview him while we just get obliterated drunk.
So I would listen to that, if only to mark the moment where I knew it was over.
Yes, please do, and let me know.
So I say all that to put a little bit of context out there. It's a lot about wanting to have real care and control of the story of your character, and enjoying the writing aspect. I think one of the things that we've said to a few guys who've gone out from our Fed to go, let me go try some of these E-Feds is, hey, you can do that because you're only going to write maybe 1 or 2 things for the card, and then you're done. And in most of the cases, there's a cap that we've seen so far. In some places, there's not, and so it's a much bigger write. I think one of the things that rolling role play creates for us is the guys don't feel the need to write 5,000 words because they know you're going to go back and forth with you 3-4 times. And it's okay to just write 500 to 1,000 words and then let somebody else take over and then come back. And then, and there's a little bit more flow and collaborative role play that's going on. But I thought that was important for us to point out. And also I wanted to give a little bit of background. So CyberSlam was owned and hosted by a company who actually had a wrestling news site. And that's how so many players found it. They went to the news site to learn what was going on with Hulk Hogan in 1996. And there's a little thing on the bottom that said, click here if you want to play CyberSlam. And people clicked there. And there was this huge fun. There was a point in time there were thousands of players at the same time playing that game. And so it was very big. And when that game got closed down, other games sprung up that were very similar and very in that mold. That's how we ended up in a bubble that doesn't really know all the things that I'm going to ask you about right now. So with that as our background and context for everybody, let's dive in and let's start just the general world of Efedding. What can you tell us about the current state of how you see it and how you've seen it as you started to build this network? Is it healthy? Is it growing? Is it stagnant? Is it aging out? What does it look like, Mikey?
All of the above. So e-wrestling is in a weird spot right now where, yes, it is aging out. The average player in Defiance Wrestling is probably in 35, 36 years old. And when I was younger, everybody was my age too. Everybody was 16, 17, 18, 21, 22. So I would definitely say that the average age of the Efedder is higher than it's ever been, because I think it's still the same guys who started the game. That said, the influx of new players is definitely very, very strong when it comes to video game Efeds, your 2K Efeds, your Fire Pro Wrestling Efeds. Those are what I see as the future of Efedding, because they're attracting a younger audience to not only play video games that are wrestling, but now they're taking it a step further and they're doing promos for the matches that they're going to sim or they're going to fight. Now they're doing segments where they're building a story around their character that's not in the game because the in-game story sucks. So I think it's baby steps, but it's the steps that the next generation is taking into e-wrestling. And maybe the next generation is very video game based. I don't know. But I think that's where I'm seeing the younger people for sure. I would say that, sorry, I got a police going by, so disregard that. But otherwise, that's where the younger people are. Otherwise, in role play and angle feds, I'm seeing all the old heads hanging out. And in the meantime, we're trying to interweave the two with my community and others. We're trying to introduce people to different ways to play so that maybe they can adapt and carry it forward.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. One of the things that we've done in the last week that I think historically we wouldn't have done is we've said to players, hey, there's a tournament there for guys who want to, why don't you? Go represent us. Maybe you'll meet some people. Maybe somebody will say, hey, what do you normally do? And they'll come poke around here. I think you're right in the idea that the connectiveness is going to be important, because as the age goes up, we couldn't keep living in a bubble. It would just mean eventually there were 5 of us left that were playing. And
exactly.
You could be the best writer in the world, but if I've read 14 of your books, I don't need to read number 15.
That's the truth. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Efedding evolves moving forward. I've seen some crazy stuff with the video game stuff. My friends over at OCWFed.com, they do some really cool stuff over there with 2K. I know Fire Pro Feds are alive and well, and over at shootwrestling.com, you can find a great Fire Pro Fed where they're an angle fed in every aspect of the word, where all they do is build stories, but when it comes match time, they just sim it, and whatever happens, happens. And so there's so many different aspects, so many different styles of EFED that eventually, hopefully, you try to hook one of those younger kids on something.
And
I want EFEDing to survive after I'm gone.
Right. Do you think that, because I think you're right. I think expecting younger kids, most of the younger kids' interest will harbor around video games. I think I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Do you think that becomes a springboard that eventually leads them to a more traditional EFED, or do you think the traditional EFED goes away and that's as far as they progress into the game?
I think Twitter, once again, Twitter comes back to is playing a big role in getting the younger players or the 2K players into written feds because they're being introduced to those characters. They're being introduced to people talking shit on Twitter in promo battles, basically, outside of their fed. And they see, oh, there's more to the game than I'm seeing. There's more. I need to look into this. And I think, I've seen people go from like a 2K fed into a poser fed because, well, it's almost the same thing. Even though the posers don't move and animate, you have a character that's built almost in a video game.
Got it. Got it. That's interesting. Um, so it, so I'm going to just jump to a question that I got. Sorry, I was a little
Go
distracted
ahead.
by what's going down here. So Soap Opera Man, who's also Colt Calhoun, who has been throwing questions at us, actually sent me one beforehand and said, hey, what are the top 3 things that keep EFED players coming back to the game? Like, are you seeing or hearing things that like, what is it that when somebody, has a baby and goes away for 3 years, as we know people do when they have their first child or even their second child, by their third child, they don't. They're just like, let the kid cry, he'll be fine. But the first 2, you get a little serious.
They learned.
Yeah. That's right. They get polished as parents. What are the things that bring them back? What is it that they miss? What is it that they like? What is that attraction factor that brings them back?
What brings them back? I think in my case, or at least in my experience, what brought me back was I suddenly had an influx of time on my hands. I suddenly had my life changed to where I have all this time and I have nothing to do. I can't find something to fill it. So I said, I wonder if Efedding still exists. And so often that's what I hear from my EFED guests is, I wondered if EFED still exist. I think it's something that they saw as part of their childhood or they saw as part of their early life. And they just said, I wonder if that's still a thing. And then they find it and it is, and they get into it. And that's what brings them back. Nostalgia almost.
Right.
So I would say that's a big factor. What else brings people back is competition. Some people like the competition when you're part of that community and you really like writing, doing creative writing and beating someone at creative writing, I guess.
Right. Sure.
And that's what it comes down to, is that competitive edge. And finally, if I can toot my own horn for a minute, I would say it's the EFED podcast, because the stories are countless of people who say, hey man, I've been out of EFEDing for 10 years. I stumbled on your podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on whatever. I saw it and hey, where can I find a Fed that's doing this? And they say, this is the way I used to play. I used to role play. I used to angle. I used to dice fed. I used to whatever. Do you know of anything that's still going on? Everybody reaches out to me, which is great. I love that. I love being that contact. But and the best part is seeing the stories, because even in Defiance, we have 3 guys who found e-wrestling again because of the podcast. And they heard the Defiance commercial over and over again, and then now they're in the Fed.
That's awesome.
So I would say the podcast has done wonders in that aspect, where I can personally claim 10 to 15 guys I got back into the game through the podcast.
It's such a great tool as well, right? As the community grows and it gets circulated and there's more and more dialogue, and honestly, just as a tool to grow a community, like the larger community it is, the easier it is to find. And so that's got to be a positive contributor just all by itself.
The community has been awesome. I can't say enough about how much when I started the podcast, I had expected and understood that Efedding was dying or dead. And I thought that it was going to be an in memoriam podcast. Let's talk to people about everything they've done for the last 20 years, because this thing going to be around much longer. And it turned into the opposite. And it turned into, holy crap, there's so many new projects going on. Let me tell you about my new Fed. Let me tell you about this new thing we got going. And it really opened my eyes that EFED is not only not dying, but it's very healthy in overall. I wouldn't say it's growing to a huge extent, but I would say it's extremely healthy. And I would say, as goes the wrestling business, as goes Efedding. When it's healthy, we're healthy.
Yeah, that leads to an interesting point. So first, before I get to that point, I do want to say this. You really just echoed something that we experienced. One of our friends' birthdays went by and we used to do podcasts and we used to all play, and they'd gotten really quiet for a couple of years. Just collectively, there weren't enough people to be interested. So we get these little sporadic spurts. Probably in a month, we wrote as much as maybe some of the guys just doing promos do in a year. Like there was, but it would be 4 guys and then no one else was playing. And I said, hey, like happy birthday. And he said, you know what I'd really like for my birthday? Like, can we get the guys back together and just do a podcast? And so we did, and I posted it. And then all of a sudden somebody was like, well, let's do another one. And we did another one. And then suddenly I did one with Lars, who we founded Federation X together. And when we did it, it was the first, I think it was the second one we live streamed, and people could get on and comment on the live stream. And all of a sudden, all these old friends started showing up, and suddenly the game was playing again. And suddenly there was, 23 people posting, and it was active. And then all of a sudden we find you and all of that happened in 6 weeks. And it went from, so a podcast had a huge impact just for our little niche community. I can only imagine how big an impact
crazy, man.
was. Yeah. And so
people just want that communion. They want that friendship. They want that, hey, I love wrestling, but my friends don't love wrestling. I need to talk to somebody about wrestling. Let's get online, God damn it.
Yes. Yes, totally agree. You also talked about as goes wrestling, so goes the interest. And I will give a shout out to a couple of our guys. I think Benny Blair and the Kansas Kid have both said this to me. Because AEW exists, we're in a time where we could be looking at more growth in the interest of the game in the next couple of years.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. When competition breeds a better product breeds more audience is going to breed more e-fedders. It's going to breed more interest in the game. It's going to breed new people looking about wrestling games. They're going to be Googling the same thing I Googled in 1997.
Right. Totally agree. And I think that's interesting because we haven't really seen that since in a real way, since the death of WCW.
Since the Attitude Era, you're exactly right. And that's what grabbed me and 40 of my friends to find out what Efedding was and get into it and, build our own little thing. But I think it's interesting. I hope AEW does well, not because I like the product, but because it breeds, better wrestling overall. I'm a big independent wrestling fan. I go to independent wrestling shows around me very, very often. I try to see as many as I can, and I love them. And when wrestling is big, then you get the guys from England coming over. You get the guys from Japan coming over. You get those mega shows. You get the fun stuff. So when wrestling's hot, I'm happy. And as long as I can still see my wrestling, which I can't right now, obviously, because of COVID,
right?
I can still EFED anyway and talk about it.
Perfect, which is why we're here. How would you describe or introduce the idea of Efedding to somebody who's never played before?
It all boils down to creative writing. When I was a kid, I was into creative writing, and I don't think anybody who's not is going to get into this game. So I think you have to have a backbone of creative writing or an interest in storytelling, even if you're not the best writer. Right. So I would say that if you find someone that is that way and they like wrestling, let me put it this way. Oftentimes you're going to find someone that likes wrestling first. And then if you find out also that they're creative or they like creative writing, it's a great introduction to say, hey, I've introduced it to 40 friends by saying, hey, it's fantasy wrestling. It's just like football, except you write the storylines. And that's what I say in a way to the elevator pitch, so to speak, is it's fantasy wrestling, but you're writing the storylines. You're writing the character. You control one character and you run his career. And about of my friends that I've tried to convince to play this game, I've gotten 2 out of 20 probably to stick around long term.
So it's not sticky. You're not going to get everybody. That's right. We have a guy from our community that we know well who's actually working the independent scene. And so Colt is asking if you've heard of or know Max Sterling.
I don't, not personally.
So if you ever cross paths or he does a local show and you get to see him, Colt once in character in the game stole his fake title belt and then for real went on eBay and put it up for sale. And if you drop that line, he will immediately want to know how you know and what the deal is.
I'll have to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super entertaining. Colt has some stories. That's
You'll have have to be in the Ohio territory.
Yeah, I think he's in the Pennsylvania, or I think that's what I last heard, but I could be wrong. I'm sure somebody.
I can confirm that there are a number of wrestlers in Ricky Morton's School of Wrestling that are also doing live Facebook promos and eFeds to try
Oh,
to gain experience.
that's hilarious.
Specifically in iWrestling or I Omega or whatever it's called. I'm not
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
Well,
there's a couple guys that are actually wrestlers or training to be wrestlers that are doing it for practice there. I know for a fact that guys like Sugar Dunkington have been e-fedders in the past. Johnny Gargano has been an e-fedder in the past. There's another famous female, I can't think of the name off the top of my head, that actually DM me about being on the podcast sometime. So we'll see if that actually turns into a thing.
nice. That's good. Hey, and speaking of just the, some of the people want to be on the podcast and just the podcast in general and the way that's played in. One of the things that I found really interesting as I listened to the podcast and that I picked up as I was talking to you is there's a bunch of terms that you drop like they're second nature to e-fedding.
There are kayfabe terms for e-wrestling, yeah.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit about what some of those terms are. Obviously, I picked up two that aren't ones that we've used. We talk in terms of Fed commissioners. You guys talk about Fed heads. I think it's the same thing functionally.
Yep. A Fed head's a person who owns and runs a Fed.
Right. You guys talk in terms of handlers. You're talking about the person behind the wrestler. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
I'm the handler of Mikey Unlikely, the character.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
So that's one. What are some of those other terms that you kind of have to know to really follow when you're scrolling through Twitter and you're seeing all this stuff go on, and I'm like, this is it. They're like, I'm launching a new this type of Fed. And I don't know that term. I don't know what that means.
Sure. Okay. This is going to be a long list. So handler is the person who handles a character. Fed head's a person who runs a Fed. Staff would be anybody who is on staff but does not own a Fed.
Okay.
Let's see. You've got your angle. An angle Fed is going to be a Fed where you tell the stories. The outcome is predetermined. You have an idea of which way your storyline's going, and you're just going to tell a story within segments and matches. So in my case, I'm in an angle Fed primarily in DefianceWrestling.com. And what we do is the handler, myself, I write the matches, the segments, anything for my character. If it has to do with my character, I'm involved in the writing of it.
Sure.
And we control everything. And so eventually, based on the Fed head's decision of who's going to hold what belt, how hard you've worked, everything's based on cooperation and input. Have I written everything on time? Am I submitting stuff that's good quality? Am I writing feedback for the shows and giving other people pointers on what I think of their stuff? The more participation you have, the higher you're going to make it in an angle Fed. It's all about storytelling. It has nothing to do with competition.
Okay.
Whereas a role play Fed is the exact opposite. A role play Fed is based on promos only. They're going to be judged against someone else. A role play Fed, it's just down to your promos. Nothing else matters. That's what I'm going to be opening up this year.
Got it.
Furthermore, there's your hybrid Feds. A hybrid Fed is a mix of angle and role play, and there's no telling what you're going to get until you get in and read their deal. Some of them, they ask you to role play until the end, and then the Fed head picks. Sometimes they ask you to angle till the end, and then they ask you to role play for the final match, the blow off, to see who wins the feud. There's all kinds of different ways a hybrid Fed can go, so it's very specific to the Fed. What else? Stim Feds. I think it's very kind of obvious that a sim Fed is you're going to tell a story, and then whatever happens in the sim happens, and you just play off of that.
Okay.
You'll hear about CAW Feds. A CAW Fed is Creator Wrestler, CAW. That's why it's called a CAW Fed. That's based on 2K, oftentimes a WWE 2K game. The Fire Pro Fed's based on Fire Pro Wrestling. What other terms are out there? Meg, drop me a couple.
She's dialed into this live stream, so I know if we keep talking, we'll get some more input from her.
So, but based on what I'm hearing, you guys are kind of like an angle sim Fed. So you guys either do the angle or the sim.
Yeah, but I think the one thing that I would point to as being different is, like, I don't go to the guys and say, okay, So next month you're going to be world champion. So you guys figure out what the story is to get you there. They work the story. And if it leads to a title match with the champion, like if the story fits, that's what I'm going to book for the card. And then they get in the card and they tell the story of the match, and the sim will tell us who wins. Now, on occasion, we do events that we judge the role play, but it's actually the match role play. The only thing they hold back on is the finish until we say, you win the match. And then the person who wins doesn't even have to write the finish. They could say, you can finish it. Like I'm taking the victory. But if you'd rather write the ending, go ahead and write it. Quite often the person wants the ending. They want to go put themselves over the way they want to do it. So you're right. We're very angled in that we're telling stories and we're letting it, but there's no, the creative control of the character, story and angle and drive to a specific title really belongs to that person.
And that's interesting. And I think it's a cool concept. And like I was telling you guys earlier in your guys' chat, I think you should stick to it and you should promote it as what makes you different. Instead of trying to adapt to other people, you should, focus in on what you're good at and make it your strong point.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It was one of the things I was going to comment on. So we'll just jump to that and I'll say this. We were trying to be accessible. We want to see some new people who really like writing and like creating character and telling the character story to explore us, to come to give it a poke and see if it's for you and give it a try. And so one of the things we were talking on our Discord channel about, like, what if we did this? What if we did this? And we were bouncing ideas. And one of the things I really appreciated was that Mikey reached out and said, I don't want to disrupt your flow of your conversation. It's good that you're not the same. Don't be in a hurry to change so much as you should make sure people understand that there's an option like yours that exists, because lots of them don't know that that's a possibility. Is that fair?
I absolutely agree. I would say a few years ago, what you do was fairly common, and that I saw it quite a bit in rolling role play. And the way I would describe that is, excuse me, you would start a short story. You would begin a story, you'd write 1,000 words of it, and then you'd leave it kind of open-ended. I would jump in, tack onto that, add whatever I wanted to your story, and then either you or someone else would come back in later and continue on. It's almost like Mafia or a forum game where you just keep on adding to what someone else started.
That's right.
And I love that concept, and I've seen it before to where people, they don't want to write a 5,000 word role play, but what they want to do is they want the interaction. They want the world building of Efedding. And so what they do is they get with other handlers and you create that world.
It's 100% right. That is spot on what we do. I think it's interesting you talk about, these 5,000 words. We used to, one of our original sites, CyberSlam, and I think it carried over for a little while out of that. We had a competition and we'd do it. I think we did it once a quarter, but I can't remember. We did something called the Barroom Brawl. And in the Barroom Brawl, you would have a round, like round one be you versus me. And we would go write our version of the story and submit it. And the judges would read them both and go, you win. And you go to the next round and you write a whole nother story against the next person. And so it was like an elimination tournament. And you're like, hey, so how long is the average book? Oh, it's 40,000 words. So I wrote that in the last 10 days. Nobody wants to pay for it, but I wrote a book.
Yeah.
But we would take that approach, or we would write at that level. And I think one of the things we quickly moved to is, how do I get that quality of a story without me writing 10,000 words and you writing 10,000? Like, how do we get there? And so we started doing these other tournaments, One World Championship and the King of Wrestling, where it is similar elimination tournament, but each round is, okay, say it's you and me now, like you go, maybe your first is like the pre-match, set up, and then I'll do mine, and then one of us is going to do an intro. One of us is going to put a twist on the story, and then the other guy's going to follow it. But we might only be writing 600 words or 800 words. If we're Benny, we might still be writing 5,000 if we're Benny. But you're right. And there's a back and forth where they will go, okay, you guys have 3 days, tell your story. And the only thing they'll say to me is, hey, don't post off yourself. Like, let Mikey go after you. Now, if you wait, 12 hours and he hasn't posted, you can go ahead and post off yourself. So you can advance the story if he's not around or not posting. And so we started going to a little bit more of this back and forth, as opposed to, write the whole match we'll judge it, and then you go to the next round and you'll write another whole mat, and like, because that got onerous, right? Guys got, first of all,
Tedious,
judges got tired, right? Judges
Yeah.
burned out. So it is an interesting difference, and I appreciated your perspective on it, because I'm very open to what can we do to make it appealing to more players, because that's, you know,
No.
that's
The way you guys play is awesome. It's unique, and you need to stick with, well, in my opinion, you should stick with it, grow that, and exploit it. I mean, make that your selling point. This is how we do it. If you want to try rolling role play, this is a place to be for rolling role play. As
yeah.
opposed to, hey, if you want to find a medium ground, no, don't be the medium ground. Be the rolling role play place.
I like this. I like the feedback, and I'm pretty sure that we have some people, especially Genocide, who will really approve of that, because he said, like, hey, if they come in and they land and they realize this isn't for them, that's okay. And I
Yeah,
think
it is
right.
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to, yeah, people are going to come. If you can land half the people who join, that's great.
Yeah. Listen, if 1 out of every 10 eyes that look at us decides to stay and play, I would be happy.
Absolutely.
So then I just have to figure out how to get 1,000 eyes to look at us.
Yeah. Well, that's the EFED podcast over at efedpodcast.com.
Correct. The best way. Although I hear they've got a waiting list that is longer than my arm. So
they do, but the EFED spotlight is wide open, so we can get you on for 2021.
Good news. Glad to hear that. So let's dive into a little bit from that discussion about all the terms and the different types of feds and how unique we are. Let's turn the conversation to the way the game is played and the different mediums for how the game's being played, because we've touched at that in a couple of different ways. And one of the things I was really interested in is, what do you see as the most common type of EFED that's out there right now?
I would say this is probably the most segmented time I've ever seen EFEDing. There are so many ways, and each way is very, very popular. I mean, I get messages all the time, and people are always looking for a very specific type of Fed. Everyone has their experience, their past experience in their mind already. They already know what they like, what they want, and they want the exact same thing with different people. And so often it's hard to find, and so often it's non-existent. But it's nice that people are saying, hey, I want a micro Fed, I want an angle Fed, I want to write 10,000 words, I want to write whatever.
Right.
And they're very open and honest about it. So you're not joining a Fed that's not for you.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let's talk about it. So Meg says, I think she thinks that's angle, which I think is a great place for me to point my next question. So let's talk about angle feds. What is the challenge for the Fed head in that format? What prevents angle feds from just blowing up and taking over? What is the weakness of the angle Fed when you think about how that game is played?
An angle Fed, your goal is to rely on the best writers, the most consistent writers, without over relying on them. With a guy like Seth in Defiance, he writes 5 characters and he writes them well. The problem is you don't want to put all 5 in prominent positions, because then you're overloading one guy.
Right.
I think in an angle Fed, you want to have a good spread. You want to have your top 3 or 4 stories. You don't want 4 main event stories. You want stories all over the card. You want a good mix of people. You want a comedy story. You want a serious. You want a good baby face. You want a couple of shitty heels. You want it all. Whereas you're actually looking for the complete show in an angle Fed. You can get sidetracked when everybody wants to be in the NWO versus WCW. That's not what you want for an angle Fed. That's you're going to be your role play Fed, where it's diehard baby face versus diehard heels. I think that the idea of an angle Fed is to try to get as much mix to keep everybody engaged as possible. Myself, I'm a comedy writer. I strive for comedy. I like to make people laugh. I don't care to be the best person, the best writer there is. I'm not. Sure. I'm just not.
I think the funny thing is that we talk to a lot, we've got guys in our core group who really are comedy writers. That's their favorite part of writing. In fact, some of them put up their hands and go, don't make me write match action. Like I hate writing, but they love everything else.
Yep.
And they all say the same thing that you just said, which is, like, I'm not the best writer, but I like to do comedy. I'll tell you, I think some of them are the best writers.
Sure. But they're not going to tell you that.
Right. we're entertained, we're all laughing, even if you don't like feel that you want to jump in with your character and be exposed to whatever the crazy thing is they're doing. You're talking about it. The Discord is lit up with banter about it. They're clearly engaging people, and I think that's really important. I see David, who joined the live stream, say communication and cooperation is really necessary in an angled Fed, which I think
Absolutely.
is good feedback.
It is very cooperative. It's a cooperative effort versus the role play versus being competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. So how are the Fed heads? So you talk about those challenges. How are the Fed heads overcoming it? What are they doing to make sure that it doesn't kind of spin out? How do they get players to find a place on the card where they fit and not all go, I should be here. My story is the most important one. It should be the main event. Like how is that happening?
That's a good question, and one I'm not too sure of because I'm not that Fed head. I can tell you Defiance Wrestling, because our average age is around 35, it's almost no drama. It's almost self-sufficient. It runs by itself, and the Fed heads are there to handle disputes. That's
Right.
almost all they do. I would say in an angle Fed, maybe that's a question for Megan. I know she runs five boroughs wrestling over at 5BW or 5vwrestling.com. She runs an angle Fed successfully over there as well. I'm just a handler in one, but I would say that the best part is that people are excited for you when you win. They're excited for you when you finally get that achievement. I was there 5 years before I won a world title, and when I did, it was a big deal, and everybody was excited. Everybody left feedback. Everybody's cooperative.
Yeah.
It's like its own little community where everybody helps each other.
Got it. Hey, so two things real quick, because I didn't realize that's who Meg was, and I want a quick shout out. I just saw a post in your Discord chat in the shill section because Meg is going to run a tag team tournament, I believe is what's going on over there at 5B Wrestling. And so I wanted to mention that because if we've got guys who love tag team or have tag team, they might be interested in checking that out and having a look at it. And also because we heard from with a little call out to you from the God of How, they're just starting their singles tournament, I think,
The
this
Danucci
week.
Cup. It'll be this month, so they're on break as well. They'll be opening up the Danucci Cup. I believe they're full now, but if not, they're close to it. So get in now.
Right.
At howrestling.com.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that's awesome, and I think it was worth shouting those ones out. That's really good. We've talked about some of the other formats that you've seen in the landscape. Do you see different challenges? So let's talk. We talked about angle. You're going to go to an RP Fed. That's what you're setting up. What are the challenges that come with you that you've seen in that format that are now standing in front of you on the cusp of this new federation you're going to launch?
Egos. That's it.
Seriously? That's the whole
when it comes
thing.
to competitive Efedding, it's just egos. It's just butt hurt and soreness, and I lost when I shouldn't have lost, and I'm ready for those conversations. It's it's one man's opinion. It's my opinion on what I think is better. You're writing for me in this case. When you join any EFED, you're writing for the Fed head unless you're cooperative.
I think that's right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's pretty well known. And basically, until you get a feel for that Fed head, you're kind of feeling around in the dark. You're doing that blind running around thing like Jake the Snake and the Model Martel at WrestleMania. You're doing that deal. You don't know where they're at, but you got to find them. You got to DDT their ass. So once you find that DDT and once you hit it flush, you find out what the Fed head likes and you know what they're looking for. I think it's just a matter of adapting to that Fed. As far as my struggle, it'll be controlling the egos, controlling the butt hurt. That's all it comes down to when you're in a role play Fed.
Well, I know that Genocide, who for many years was my tag team partner, and we were very successful. When we were coming back and talking about like, hey, what does bringing in new players look like? What do we need to do? And he, half tongue in cheek, half not tongue in cheek, said we should teach a class on butt hurt. And he was like, part of it was a jab, and part of it was legitimate. Like, we're gonna need to teach people how to get over the ego issue. Yeah.
And for younger people, it's different than as you age and as you get more mature, you understand wrestling people have to lose. There's always a winner and a loser. Sometimes it's you.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, on a recent podcast we were talking about, and we use the sim often to determine the outcome. Sometimes we just do role play matches, but more often we'll use the sim to decide the outcome. And one of the things that came out of it was somebody saying, I just want just flip a coin. I don't care if I win or lose. I actually want to be open to losing more because it helps me develop more of the character of my wrestler than just win, 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 win all the time.
Yeah.
But, let's get there in a way that I don't have to, then nobody answers for it, right? The machine said you lose. Okay.
Sorry, man.
Right.
It was up to the machine. Yeah, it's hard to
Nothing,
argue.
nothing I can do about it.
I like getting to a point. I like getting to a point where a guy can own me, and then I beat him once, and I can brag about that one time. To
I
where
think, first of all, that's totally sellable as a character, isn't it?
it's great. I've got a chicken shit heel. And the last show I said, Oscar Burns is always on my tail. I don't know why that guy won't give it up. He's 1-5 against me. Come on, man. I beat you once. That's all that matters.
Which is
Forget the other
hilarious,
5.
right? Like that
Yeah.
is the character. I love the chicken shit heel role. I was just talking to the guys the other day about how much I want. Like, I think it's the one archetype I've never played.
Oh, I love it. It's so much fun.
Oh, it's fantastic. So we're talking our way through just the different styles of game that are out there. Tell me a little bit more about whether it's the 2K style of game where it's just being run on the sim, or I think you mentioned another one, and some of my guys know it, but I don't. Fire something.
Fire Pro Wrestling.
Yeah,
It's a
tell me a
Japanese
little bit about
game. It's a Japanese game. It's based on New Japan Wrestling as of the last release. What it is basically in those deals is you either create a character on the game, and then you can upload it to the internet to where these feds can grab it, I guess, and include it in their game. I've never been a part of these. They're new to me as of the last year, but I've got a lot of guys on the show that do it. I've talked to many guys, and basically you run a character on 2K. They're going to put them in their shows. They're going to book them on cards, and they're going to sim it to see where they end up. Meanwhile, your job is to get on Twitter and talk shit about the matches, hype the events, promote the shows, promote the Fed. All of these shows end up on either YouTube or Twitch. These Feds have their own websites
Yep.
where they stream stuff live. And a lot of them, what's interesting is a lot of them have their own commentators to where they'll mute the game and they'll have 2 or 3 guys talking about what's happening. And it's almost like wrestling commentators. Some of them are very, very good to where they can entertain you for 2 hours and you're just like, holy shit, a whole 2 hours has gone by. And they're
Wow.
just talking about these 2K matches that, the moves are already programmed in. You know what the moves are going to be.
Right.
It's just they're telling the story like they're JR and the King, and it's really cool. I love the production value people put into it. OCWFed.com is a good one for 2K. ShootWrestling.com is good for Fire Pro, and it's totally different than what I've ever experienced, and I think it's cool because growing up, not only did I Efed, but I also played No Mercy. I also played SmackDown versus Raw. I
Yep.
always created my character, and I always whooped ass. So now they're just combining the 2 worlds, and they're creating something in between, and I think it's totally awesome. I'm on board. Maybe I'm not with it. Maybe I can't create a character, but I think it's great that they're doing it.
Is there an element of it, like I get the simming part of it? Is there an element of it? They're on Twitter. I guess they're doing promos, but that's about the extent of it. And on Twitter, those promos aren't very long in terms of the writing.
There's different kinds of feds even in the 2K world. So even in their what we call a CAW world, there's a sim fed where everything is sim. There's a competitive fed where, hey, I get on with Mikey Unlikely on my PlayStation, you get on with Grayson on your PlayStation, and we fight, and whoever wins the match wins the match. And so there's competitive playing feds, there's sim feds, there's highlight feds. These are wild too, where they'll record the 2 wrestlers having a match like 20 times. They'll record 20 matches. Then they'll just take the highlights and they'll make highlight package videos of just these matches, and then just show finally the one finish that they really liked. And it's crazy that they have all these angles, they have all these editing. It takes what I do on a podcast level to a next level because they're doing it on a bi-weekly basis with the video production, the commentary team. They have custom arenas, titles, everything in the game, and it's just out of this world.
Wow. That's
It's nuts. It takes a lot of
that's
effort. I'll give them that.
no question more commitment than I have.
Yeah, same, same.
I'll show my age a little bit. Like obviously I'm older in a significant way because I was playing when you were discovering WWE.
Yeah.
So and so I think what's foreign to me is that the game's evolved to a place, and I know this is going on for all kinds of games, where people are logging onto a service like Twitch to watch somebody else play.
Blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm dumbfounded by, and yet it's huge, like really big.
My kids will watch other kids play Minecraft for hours at a time, and I just don't get it. I'm
Yeah,
so bored. I don't want to hear this other kid talk who I didn't raise.
that's how I feel.
I just can't. I can't do it, man. I don't know. If you guys want to watch me play a video game for 2 hours, great, but I can't watch somebody else do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, hey, before we leave the different variations of games, let me just ask. I mean, you're going to run an RP Fed. Is that
Yeah.
your favorite version of a Fed?
I don't know. It's all I knew for so long from 99 to 2015. I didn't know anything else existed. I thought it was just all role play feds. So that's what I did. And I, got decent at it for a long period of time. And once I started to climb the ranks, I'm like, yeah, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm going to do. I'm the man. And then I got my ass kicked a couple times and decided, okay, you know what? Maybe there's other kinds of wrestling I can play. And I found angle fedding. I found a way that I don't have to be the best writer to be successful. I just have to be the funniest or the best this week and have some fun.
Yeah.
And it's been a great experience. It's been my most successful experience. I mean, I didn't have too many great title runs before I became an angle wrestler, and now I'm the heavyweight champion of Defiance and have been for almost a calendar year.
Wow, that's a long title run for an EFED, isn't it?
It really is. It's exceptional, and I think the third longest in history now, creeping up
Oh,
on
wow.
number 2. So I'm
Wow.
very very proud of that. I'm hoping that the podcast has nothing to do with that, but I'm not willing to look past it.
I mean, we're giving it credit for a lot of things. We might have to give it some credit for this as well.
In the meantime, I've been there 5 years and I've worked my way to the top and I've enjoyed my time, and it's really a great Fed. It's a great community. If you're into angles, if you're into knowing the results ahead of time and writing the best story, check out defiancewrestling.com. It's a great place to be. And we've got some players who have been in the game for 20 years on average.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild.
I would say angle is probably my favorite.
Is it?
Yeah.
Commits to it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear from those of you on the live stream. We're going to start transitioning towards the end of our podcast. If you have questions that we haven't answered yet, you need to put them up in the live stream. Colt and Johnny XS can both save the questions that are irrelevant that you just want me to ask to be a jerk. There's no need for you to post those ones because I'm not going to answer them. But
hey, can I take a 2-minute break real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
I will see what I can do to entertain. And so while we take a 2-minute break, I think I'll take a chance here while Mikey takes a quick run and say, hey, what's going on the live stream that we can talk about? What can we answer? What other questions are out there? Let's bring it in. When Mikey comes back, we're going to get him to give us a top 5, and then we're going to wrap up the podcast. We've had a great conversation so far tonight. The live stream's over 500 comments. I know a lot of it's banter. I love seeing it. I love knowing that you guys are out there participating, watching, listening, being involved. And I love when people throw questions up. I know some of the ones you've asked have gone by and I didn't catch them. I know some of the ones that I saw, I ignored because they're brutal and not at all appropriate for this podcast. Eric, I think that's a great question. So we will ask that once Mikey's ready to go again. He's just jumping back on now. And as soon as he unmutes and says he's good.
Hey guys, I had to go to the bathroom and grab the cheap tequila.
Yeah, there you go. We did a podcast not long ago, and and it closed, it wrapped up because Genocide couldn't wait any longer and was going to carry his laptop with him into the bathroom. And so I wrapped up the podcast. So there you go. Eric asked me, he's such a big fan of how the heel really sets the focus or the tone for the stories in a federation. How you feel the state of heels are as a whole in Efedding. Are they strong? Are there good ones out there? Is it overdone? Are they getting flat? Where's that sitting right now?
As long as you're not the cool heel or the creepy heel, you're in good shape. I think they were so overdone for so long because of The Undertaker, because of the NWO, because of Steve Austin, that it became a cliche. And if you can avoid those cliches and still write a believable heel, you're in good shape.
So
I would say today you're seeing a lot more Ric Flairs. You're seeing a lot more classic. You're seeing more Marty Scrolls, more people who are going back to what used to work, and which is what I love because of obviously I'm into 80s wrestling and the older stuff. I tend to base my character on Ric Flair or a Nick Bockwinkel or those kind of styles where they're always looking for a way to cheat whenever the referee's not looking. My character couldn't out wrestle a bear, but he can hit you with brass knuckles 10 different ways before anybody sees him. I love that. And I love the heels in today's game. I've recently, one's been retired that I would say if you can look back on and read his stuff, it was absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like it. He writes what I would call not a heel, but a super villain. It's almost comic book-esque, and his name's Max Kael, Kael. If you can find Max Kael stuff, he's from High Octane Wrestling. He is one of the best heels I've ever read in my entire life. It seriously reads like a demented Batman character. It's terrific.
that's an interesting heel, right? That whole
He stands out so far. He stands out so far from the pack that he's just miles above.
That's interesting. So I think we've seen a few people who really just write that well, and we call them out on a fairly regular basis. I'm working on getting one of them to come spend some time on the podcast with us.
Well, now that Max Kael's gone, I would say the best heel is Mikey Unlikely, and I certainly strive to be.
little there you go.
Little shoulder rub.
That's right. I see David's out there and he's getting some call outs from Megan about the quality of his heels, although he suggests they're maybe not as good as they used to be. I don't know about that. We have kind of a term for some of our, specifically our top heel. He's heelish in that old douchebag Ric Flair way, and proud of it. Like if you drop it and you go, man, you are playing him like such a douchebag, you're going to get a thank you card. Like
that's the way I am too. This is my guy. It sounds like we've got room in 24K for him. That's our stable.
Right. That's entirely the way that gets played. So totally agree. I'm just taking a quick second to see if any other questions roll by there that I missed. I think Tim asked one, and I think it's a great one for me to ask you while we've got you here. Tim says, hey, we want to get people to take a look. We want to get a little bit more exposure. Aside from just getting on Twitter, do you recommend, is there specific, like, should we advertise somewhere? Like, how do we get some new players to take a look and poke around? What's your advice? What are the maybe top 3 things you would say, get on?
Get on the EFED podcast.
Yep.
DefianceWrestling.com, EWC, which is EWC, the number 4 life.com. You can find them. They actually are RP fed with 100 characters, active characters in their fed. They've got 4 different brands. They're fed so big that they split it up 4 times. They got a fed head and 4 GMs. It's wild. But they've both been advertising on the EFED podcast for over a year. Both have gotten 10 to 20 characters each from advertising, just the exposure on the EFED podcast. I hate to just shill on here.
Sure, that's fine. We don't mind if it works.
But it honestly works. Otherwise, I would say stick to Twitter. Twitter has the most active handlers I've ever seen at one time on Efedding. You just have to find the right follows in order to get the retweets and such.
Yep.
Facebook is kind of the dying breed, I've noticed. I haven't gotten as much traction on Facebook as I have in the past. Obviously, you can do things like this, Facebook Live, which
Yeah.
is awesome that you can't do on Twitter. So there, if you can get the audience, and obviously we have, this is terrific.
Yeah, I said it when you stepped away. We're over 500 comments on the live stream. And I get it. Lots of that is them bantering, but they're here. They're enjoying it. They're talking to each other. What a great thing to have going
I
on.
appreciate you guys so much for just tuning in and listening to us bullshit each other. But
Yeah, exactly right.
the long and short of it is yeah, Twitter is a great place to advertise. Efed Podcasts obviously is a great place to reach, 150 to 250 a week, just from our perspective. And then otherwise, I would say get in as many Discords as you can. Find the other Discords. Ask them if it's okay. Make sure you ask always if it's okay to show your stuff. Say, hey, I've got a Fed. I'm looking for people. Can we sponsor each other? Can we put your link on our website? Can we have ours on yours? It's still a great way to communicate, great way to get to know people in the community. And obviously the EFED podcast Discord is a great place to meet those other people in the community. So
Yeah.
I just dropped a link in the Federation X chat for our Discord. Feel free to drop in. If you need another link, let me know. We did take it private recently because of trolls everywhere. And that's just the way the internet goes. So
yeah, hold on. Let me
us
just
know
be
if you
really
need a link,
clear.
and we'd be happy to have you in.
You FedEx guys go there, rein your trolling in. Do your trolling on our Discord because we all know who you are and we don't care about it.
Listen, people think they can get around my bans. They can't get around my ban.
There you go. That's perfect.
I take invites down.
That's right. All right. One last question. We'll just pick your brain for knowledge before we transition. And I saw it came from Tim as well. It's something we've talked about. We're certainly aware of it. We played in such a contained community for so long. We just didn't worry about the polish on our site or on our forums or on other things. How big a role do you think that plays in the attractiveness for new players? And is it something we should prioritize as we head into 2021?
It's a great question. And for younger players, it's very important. I can tell you when I was younger, and as I've talked to people who are younger who are still playing the game in a traditional sense, one of the first things they look for is a functioning website, is graphics, is, does it look good? Do I want my character in that space? Right. And if the answer is yes, then that's what they're attracted to. A lot of younger people just go for the graphics, the aesthetics. They don't care about the writing. They don't care what the quality is, as long as their character gets a cool banner with their face on it.
Right.
I think that's very important to the younger crowd. But if you're looking for experienced players, if you're looking for quality over quantity, I think what's important is consistency, activity, and play. So the fact that you have people posting every hour on your forum is a strong indicator that this is an active forum. People are active. This is ongoing. If people look at your Fed and they don't see any activity for 2 weeks on a forum, is this Fed even still alive? I don't know. I'm not even gonna join it. So I would say it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for the younger player to get them engaged, go for graphics. If you're looking for the old school wrestler, the person who's been around forever, who knows the game and wants to get into community, then you go for the activity and you go for just overall openness and, just obviously it's active.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great feedback. We really appreciate this. And before we go, I'm going to ask you to share with us. We like to do a top 5 when we close with our guest. And so
yes.
I talked to Mikey beforehand and we batted around some ideas. I'm going to ask him to give us his top 5 EFED podcast moments. And
I'm going to turn it and twist it and turn it around again. And I'm just going to give you what I wanted to do was moments. But when I started looking at the list, all I could come up with was oh, well, this episode plus this episode together. So we'll just call them EFED stretches. How about that?
Perfect.
So what we're going to do is on the EFED podcast, if you want to check it out, some of the top 5 moments would be episodes 4 and 6 together. That's with Eric Dane. You may have heard of Eric Dane. He's been around since early 90s. He's been in mail feds and everything else in between. It's Justin Taylor. He was in the NEWA and many more. It's a great interview with Justin. And then he had a lot of stuff to say about Mike, who ended up on episode 6 with Mike Best. And they went back and forth with some very, very good banter, if you're into that sort of thing. A lot of trash talk. Episode 17 was very good. That's my number 2. That was Mac from the EWC. It is the largest EFED that I know that is running today. with the most active characters, handlers. The scale of this eFed is insane. You can check it out at EWC, the number 4 life.com. It's pretty wild, but it's a great Fed. He's super laid back. He's cool to talk to, and he's very smart. So it's nice to hear from him. Third one would be episodes 22 and 23. This is Andy Murray and Stevie Ferrugia, two of my best friends in the hobby. These are the guys I vacationed in London with. It's very obvious from our conversations that we're good friends. It's very smooth and fun. So those are good ones. For those of you who don't know, Andy Murray is now with whatculture.com. He is one of their wrestling commentators.
I knew that name from somewhere.
He's been with them for a couple of years now. We've been friends for a long time, and when he got the dream job, it was so cool to see him get it and to watch him grow into like a YouTube personality almost. And now I'm trying to follow in his footsteps with the eFed podcast stuff, so that's fun.
That's awesome.
So yeah, check out Andy Murray on What Culture. Also on episode 22 of the eFed podcast. He's also on DefianceWrestling.com still today. Check out episode 31. That's Bobby Dean. He is the funniest motherfucker I've ever heard of. Sorry for the language if it's not allowed.
It's fine.
Funniest guy I've ever known in all of e-wrestling. Me and him just laugh until we're in tears on the entire episode. It's just nonstop banter, nonstop fun. Check out episode 31. It's terrific. Probably my favorite episode of all time. And finally, for fifth, I've got episode X listed in there, and that's the one where I'm going to be talking to you, Grayson, or anybody who's listening here on Facebook Live. I want to thank everybody for joining us and taking the time to tune into my stupid face. And I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. And I hope to get all of you on the eFed podcast when I open up the submissions for the interviews again, when I'm not a year and a half ahead. So
right.
Keep your eyes peeled for 2021. I will be opening that back up. And we'll get more people on the list, and we'll keep growing, because as long as this thing's growing, I'm not going to stop. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and shill. I'm about to give you all kinds of shill stuff here. Let's go efedpodcast.com. Check it out. Make sure you check it out on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, all the things. Please give us a 5-star review wherever you're at. Check out ewtees.com or efedtees.com, your number one source for eFed merchandise. Great quality, fast shipping. Anywhere in the world. Check it out, efedtees.com. Check us out on Twitter. I think I did that already, at eWrestlingTees. Check us out everywhere on Facebook. Please follow us. We don't have many followers on Facebook yet for the eFed podcast. We're just getting it started. Just search eFed podcast everywhere. Like us everywhere. Follow us everywhere on YouTube. Hit that bell, subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate it. My girls get on me all the time because they're 8. And they know to tell me to hit the subscribe button, and I don't know to say it. So hit the subscribe button, God damn it. I would greatly appreciate it. Brian would greatly appreciate it. He's the unsung hero of eFed podcast. He's the silent partner. Shout out to Brian. Grayson, thanks so much, buddy. This is a lot of fun.
Hey, I'm so glad we got to do this. Thank you so much for coming on. I know there's a lot of thank yous that have been thrown out here by people from Federation X. This was an eye-opening conversation for a lot of them. I'm super glad to see some of those people that came from outside of Federation X for this podcast, to listen to the conversation, to contribute to the live stream, to participate. Thank you all so very much. If you aren't familiar with Federation X, you want to learn more about it, you can drop by. Tim will drop the link in the live stream because I don't know it off the top of my head. Drop by our
Discord too. Yeah, drop it in my Discord.
In the Discord, we'll put it in there. I'm so glad everybody made it out tonight. Have an awesome 2021. What a great way to start it out.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And happy birthday, Federation X. This is 18. You're legally allowed to drink in Canada.
In Canada only.
There you go. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks again, Mikey.
Thank you so much.